we hope. South Africa's growth forecast has been adjusted to 2.5% for the next fiscal. And then we wrap up the Nedbank Cup and its football meets fashion campaign a little bit later in the show. But first, let's start with our top stories. The ANC's National Executive Committee is expected to announce premier candidates for the 8 provinces it controls during a news conference in Johannesburg today. The party completed a grueling debate over the list submitted by provincial structures last night. Provincial legislatures will endorse the premiers tomorrow, and President Jacob Zuma will announce his cabinet on Sunday, a day after his inauguration on Saturday. The details of the Oscar Pistorius mental observation judgment will be outlined at the High Court in Pretoria today. Judge Thokozile Masipa is expected to hand down a specific order, including details of whether or not the athlete will be an outpatient, where he will be admitted, and the number of psychologists and psychiatrists that will be treating him. The platinum producers Lonmin, Impala and Anglo American are expected to oppose an urgent court interdict by the trade union AMCU at the Johannesburg Labour Court today. AMCU wants the mines to stop communicating a new wage offer directly to about 70,000 workers who have been on strike for nearly 4 months now. Now, Oscar Pistorius is back in court today. The North Gauteng High Court is likely to hand down an order referring Oscar Pistorius for mental observation. Last week, Judge Thokozile Masipa ruled that Pistorius should undergo a psychiatric evaluation to determine whether he had been affected by mental illness, specifically generalized anxiety disorder, when he shot and killed his girlfriend Reva Steenkamp in February last year. This is a significant turn in the Oscar Pistorius murder trial, has left many people with questions, fears and opinions about mental illness. Now, for the latest, we cross live to our reporter, Griselda Lewis, who, as always, is outside the North Gauteng High Court doing the business. Good morning, Griselda.
Very good morning to you, Eben.
Griselda, before we start on this observation we're going on, I saw some people picketing outside the court a little bit earlier there when Oscar arrived. Just tell us what that is all about.
Well, it really wasn't picketing this morning, but we were quite surprised to see an upcoming South African artist here who came to perform a song called Who is Oscar Pistorius? Really, we were all in stitches outside of the court here. We really were not expecting it. It seems to be someone who's really just trying to get some publicity for a song which we understand this young man plans to release called Who is Oscar Pistorius? They're still standing out there. Really, the young artist is surrounded by 2 hype men who are carrying placards written Who's Oscar Pistorius. So really quite entertaining outside here before we begin the day's proceedings in court.
Griselda, now general anxiety disorder will be the order of the day. I think I suffer from it myself. Why is it relevant in this trial?
Well, yeah, but the relevance to the general anxiety disorder really came with the testimony of Dr. Meryl Foster when she was brought in as part of the defense team to come and give testimony on what it is she found after evaluating or observing Oscar Pistorius. After that observation in May this month, she had basically found that Oscar Pistorius had suffered from a general anxiety disorder, and it had been the case since a very early age. And she went on during a testimony, that is Dr. Foster, to indicate how Oscar Pistorius' fractured childhood, the death of his mother, the absence of his father, had affected Oscar Pistorius. So that was brought to light inside court, and there was a link basically that was made between Oscar Pistorius' condition and the reaction on that morning that he shot and killed Reva Steenkamp. Basically that giving the state ammunition to ask or to bring an application for Oscar Pistorius to be sent for psychiatric evaluation, as Ansi already indicated. That was granted last week. So this morning, we'll really get to hear what the finer details are regarding to when this will happen, how it will happen, who are these panel of experts who will treat Oscar Pistorius, and also very importantly, what we want to see is whether Oscar Pistorius will be an outpatient. You would recall that before we adjourned last week, Judge Thokozile Masipa said that she did not want to punish Oscar Pistorius twice, and that she would recommend that he be an outpatient. But that is really there's a lot of criticism that has been drawn from that statement by Judge Thokozile Masipa, because many of the experts who we spoke to have indicated that it's really unusual for someone who's going to undergo a 30-day psychiatric evaluation to do that as an outpatient. Basically, what the experts are saying is that Oscar Pistorius is supposed to be inside the psychiatric facility for 30 days. So very crucially, what we want to establish the duration, and that's exactly what will indicate the way that this murder trial proceeds.
Is there a murmur of special treatment because of this on the street there?
Well, there's always speculation on the streets, but I mean, this case has really gripped local and international headlines. But some of the experts are saying perhaps it could be because of Oscar Pistorius' condition, that perhaps that there might be special treatment. But the clinical psychologists who've been updating SABC News or giving some insight into a lot of the proceedings inside when this particular disorder had been highlighted inside the North Gauteng High Court have really criticized this call by the judge for Oscar Pistorius to be an outpatient. But whether the state will agree to that is really what we want to see when the court does resume at 9:30, because the state did want a 30-day evaluation. They might even argue or have argued against him being an outpatient. But a lot of criticism from that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it is up to the judge to decide, of course, in accordance with the state in this particular aspect.
And then, Criselda, what are the experts saying? Why are the defense so dead set against this observation?
Number one, Eben, you could possibly see this as an extensive delay in the Oscar Pistorius murder trial. You would recall that the state had already indicated that it planned to finish its case by the 16th of May.
Yeah.
But now, with roping in the psychiatrist, Dr. Meryl Foster, she was brought in, many experts say, to do damage control after Oscar Pistorius' dismal showing on the stand, to bring Dr. Meryl Foster in to perhaps link this disorder to his possible action on that morning when he shot and killed Reeva Steenkamp. But the experts are saying that certainly has backfired, because the state now says if there is such a link, why should we proceed with this case without fully understanding from an independent panel of experts what Oscar Pistorius' state of mind was on the morning that he shot and killed Reeva Steenkamp? So the state is basically saying, in order for that to be established, let this process happen. And also, if you look at it much further, Eben, if this case does reach an appeal stage, if it had to go to the appeals court and this issue of the general anxiety disorder is brought up once again, then the appeals court would ask the question as to why that particular issue was not dealt with at this lower court. And that would certainly open up Judge Thokozile Masipa to a lot of scrutiny about why it was not dealt with at the time. So really, a lot of people are saying, yes, South Africa's justice system is on trial here, but certainly if you look at it from another aspect, also Judge Thokozile Masipa's reputation for it to be seen that justice is done in this case. So might be a good move, certainly on the court's part, for him to be referred to a psychiatric facility so that all the holes are covered for the case to proceed then.
Thank you very much, Criselda Lewis. Up to the minute updates from Criselda Lewis on Twitter. Well, you can also get it at SABC News Online, or you can connect with us at SABC Newsroom. Of course, just to recap there, the details of the Oscar Pistorius mental observation judgment will be outlined at the High Court in Pretoria today. Judge Thokozile Masipa is expected to hand down a specific order, including details of whether or not the athlete will be an outpatient, where he will be admitted, and the number of psychologists and psychiatrists that will be treating him. Last week, Wednesday, Masipa granted the state's application that he be sent for mental observation for 30 days after the court heard he had general anxiety disorder. Prosecutor Gerinel said it was necessary to send Pistorius for evaluation in case the disorder might have affected his behavior on the night he shot and killed his girlfriend Reva Steenkamp. Defense lawyer Barry Roux argued against the motion, saying it was premature to have the evaluation before he called other witnesses. Now, Marius du Toit from Du Toit Attorneys is in our Pretoria studio to give us the implications of sending Oscar Pistorius for this mental observation and how it's likely to affect the outcome of the trial. Now, before we start, I understand, Marius, that you told our producer last week that you would eat your hat, pull a Lakota, as it were, if Judge Masipa grants this application. Is that still the case?
Well, Eben, thank you for reminding me. Yes, that is of course the case. I couldn't find a hat small enough to eat, though. Let me just be honest about that. Eben, I was really surprised when the judge gave the order, and because this is really an extreme order. It's not an order that you find regularly granted in our courts. Because when this order is granted, it typically means that the person is, of course, a person that needs to be psychiatric evaluated. And it's not only just a question of suffering from a mental disorder and being referred. It, of course, has everything to do with the fact that the person is either not fit to stand trial because he doesn't appreciate the proceedings in court, but it could also refer to at the time of the offence. And that is the second leg, what Barry Roux was referring to during the course of the trial. So I was really surprised when the order was granted.
Were you surprised that the defence was opposing this order, and what would their thinking be in doing so?
Eben, I was not surprised by the fact that Barry Roux and them opposed the application, because this is such an extreme order. You know, if you look at the fact that there are two legs that the court has to satisfy before she sends him, the fact that he was suffering from a mental disorder is only the first leg. The second leg is, at the time when he perpetrated a crime, did he appreciate the knowledge of wrongfulness? Did he appreciate what he did was wrong? And the psychiatrist clearly testified that he did appreciate. We're not saying that he's not fit to stand trial. We're only saying that he suffers from this disorder. So the fact that he was referred is really something that I think caught everybody off guard. And in the circumstances, I was really not surprised that they would have opposed it, because you have to understand that the defense, the state now has an opportunity to consider this version, whereas otherwise they would not have considered this version. There's no way for them to have subjected Oscar to their own psychiatrist other than by employing this measure. Because as a rule, the accused has a right to say, listen, I don't want to subject myself to your tests. And for that reason, by getting this order granted, it was, so to speak, the back door being opened by the state and getting him evaluated or examined by their own experts to see if they can refute Oscar's state of mind.
Could it be a case, let's turn our focus to Judge Masipa. The whole world is watching. Could it be as simple also as Judge Masipa wanting justice seen to be done and her wanting the court to be seen to be doing its work 100%?
Yeah, but, I think that this trial has pressures that no other judge, no other state prosecutor, no other advocate has been subjected to. The media scrutiny has meant that every word that has been spoken by every person in this court gets either retweeted, get either reported on, or gets pulled apart by legal experts. So, I think she erred on the side of caution by saying, listen, I'd rather do this now and be criticized for the fact that I'm erring on the side of caution than at the later stage being subjected to scrutiny by the Supreme Court of Appeal. So definitely I think that, she tried to be really fair, and I think she really tried to have justice prevail in the circumstances, but I still believe that in the circumstances she really stretched it far. Even I can take my 22 years that I've now been involved in the criminal field, and about 9 years of that was in the Justice Department as a prosecutor magistrate. And I've only seen people referred maybe 3 or 4 times in my life. So you understand, this is not just a measure that's employed willy-nilly when any person says he suffers from a mental disorder. This is reserved for your serious matters. And when I think back in my days as prosecutors, we are talking about people that were completely, at the time when they were in court, they were obviously not, they didn't have the mental faculties. I remember the one person was doing a karate kata whilst the court proceedings was going on, and he was doing flip-flacks there in the back of the court, and the magistrate had to reprimand him continuously. I remember another matter where a person was caught in a vehicle stealing a radio, and his defense was, I was picking up seashells on the seashore at the time. and I don't know about this car, and I don't know about this radio that was being stolen. But typically what you'd always find is something that precedes it. You'll have a family member that would come forward and say, listen, my son has been in and out of psychiatric wards. He doesn't bode well. We've always had difficulty. So there's usually a precursor to having a person committed. So I was really astounded.
Doesn't really fit the profile of this case, it leaves. But I wanted to ask you about Oscar's defense in conclusion, Maurice, and your take on it with your experience. It seems as if the defense has changed a couple of times during the last couple of months. How do you read it?
Yeah, Eben, Oscar has definitely deviated from his initial defense of a putative self-defense by raising this accidental discharge. And I don't think his defense team prepared for that. And I think it caught everybody off guard. But this version, with regards to his psychiatric state of mind, or the fact that he suffers from this anxiety disorder, is really important when you look at the putative self-defense. You must remember that putative self-defense is a subjective test to see if this person, at the time when he perceived this erroneous belief that he was being attacked, so you have to look subjectively what was going on in his mind. Now, if the defense is saying to the judge, listen, not only should you consider Oscar as a person with a mental disability, not only should you consider Oscar being on his stumps, but hey, you should also look at the fact that he suffers from an anxiety disorder and he's predisposed to being a person that's perhaps more erratic than you and I. Then you have to keep this in mind when you consider his erratic actions the night in question. So it's everything to do with his defense, and I think it's a really important step. But I don't think the defense prepared for this referral. I think it caught them off guard, and I thought Harry Nell must have felt quite pleased with himself after the referral.
Marius, thank you very much for joining us. Wonderful insights there from a very experienced former judge and prosecutor, Marius du Toit, from Du Toit Attorneys in our Pretoria studio, giving his take on how matters will proceed when court resumes in about 15 to 20 minutes' time. Let's just have a quick look at what's happening around the world on the front pages of some of the top broadsheets. The Wall Street Journal in the US reporting on the devastating floods in Serbia. At least 35 people have already been killed and tens of thousands forced to flee their homes in the worst flooding in more than 120 years. The Daily Champion in Nigeria reporting on a bomb the police in Kano managed to avert in what could have been another devastating bomb blast in the ancient city there. The Moscow Times focusing on President Vladimir Putin ordering the Defense Ministry to withdraw troops from Russia's border with Ukraine on Monday. What analysts believe is a sign of the Kremlin's willingness to de-escalate tensions with Kiev and the West. Now, those are just some of the headlines from around the world. Of course, lots of other news at SABC Newsroom is where you can get us on Twitter. Of course, on Facebook. Facebook and Twitter, lots of pictures have been coming in on all our social media platforms. There you have In Serbia News Network. Thank you, Croatia. Special unit of Croatian helps people in Serbia with the flooding. There you can see towns completely underwater. It really is. Help spreading news and hashtag about, hey, there you go, hashtag Serbia floods. Nearly 40 people have drowned now with tens of thousands displaced. You can really see the human cost of it. Sherdan Sharikas says, please contribute raising awareness on hashtag Serbia floods, Bosnia floods, Balkan floods. Pick Twitter. There you have some of the dogs. Serbia needs help of a good man's world. Thank you, Serbia. The pictures of dogs being saved and dry walls being set up. It really is a human tragedy playing out in the Balkans there. Very much flooding all over Serbia. Nearly 40 people died, tens of thousands displaced. Keep an eye on that. We'll keep an eye on it here, how that story develops as well. Time for us to take a short break. When we come back, we look at South Africa's economic outlook, and then we'll wrap up the Nedbank Cup. They'll go away.
SABC, sharing 20 years of inspiration. A very warm welcome to you at home. This is Afro Showbiz News, the show that brings you all things art and entertainment from around the African continent. Tunisian rapper Ben Ahmed, better known as Clay BBJ, has been released after spending 2 weeks in prison. The arrest came after he was accused of insulting security and violating public morals. The songs sung by the artists criticized the current situation in Tunisia. That's Afro Showbiz. Catch us every Saturday evening at 7:30.
Zoom into Africa. This is Senegal. The president is Mr. Macky Sall. Senegal withdrew from the Mali Federation on 20 August in 1960. The population is more than 13 million people. One of the major languages spoken is French. Monetary unit is CFA.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom here on SABC News. South African economic growth will increase to about 2.5% during the course of this year, driven largely by global recovery, stronger exports and some resilience from the high-income consumer. However, the rand will remain under pressure throughout the year, fueled by the United States Federal Reserve's tapering program. To discuss the current situation and how can investors take advantage of the current economic situation, we are joined in Cape Town, in our studio in Sea Point, by investment specialist Martin Ackerman. Good morning, Mr. Ackerman. Thank you for joining us.
Morning, Eben.
Just give us the broad strokes about why we're sort of lagging behind the rest of the continent at the moment and how you view the medium term.
Yes, I think the 2.5 that we refer to is actually the very optimistic scenario, unfortunately. I think, if we look at the current headwinds in our local economy, growth can very much get closer to the 2% level. The IMF already adjusted our growth to 2.3 for 2014. So 2.5 is a very optimistic scenario. Maybe let's a little bit talk about that. That's basically based on the fact that South Africa normally benefit if the global economy picks up. And that's what we're seeing at the moment. Around the world, there's a more synchronized pickup in terms of global economic activity. Because we export a lot to those countries, there's a bit of an underpin from that side of the world. On top of that, we've got a weaker currency, so that's a further benefit in making us more competitive. But unfortunately, what we're seeing at this point in time is that we don't get that benefit in terms of on the bottom line in the local economy. And a large result is, and that's basically on the back of the striking activity going on. So if we look at the numbers to date in terms of mining and manufacturing, that's painting a very bleak picture, especially for the first quarter of 2014. So I do think 2.5% is a bit of a stretch. That will be an underpin from a consumer that's already under pressure. We're seeing high interest rates. We see very high inflation. We know that the government is talking about reducing some of the social support. Yeah. So it's a tough environment for the consumer. It's a good or a better environment for exports, but then that's a little bit capped by some of the striking activity that's going on. So that's why, it's a very tough growth environment, and we expect a very different or similar kind of environment compared to 2013.
Do you see another rate hike in the immediate future for South African consumers? And then also, maybe if you can just tell us, what do you think the government has to do in the short term, in their next term, to get ourselves out of this slump, really?
Yeah, I think let's first talk about the interest rate. Yes, there's likely to be more interest rate hikes going forward. That's largely on the back of the fact that inflation is quite sticky. We're hanging around 6%. The Reserve Bank is targeted to maintain a very stable inflation environment, probably below 6%. So that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is the wee growth that we spoke about. So they're in a very, very tough environment where, in fact, they would like to reduce interest rates to stimulate growth and economic activity. But on the other hand, they actually would like to increase interest rates to prevent inflation from running away. So they are sitting today and tomorrow. They need to make the interest rate decision, so it's not really up to us. But if you ask me right now, I think given the change in environment since they hiked in January, At that point, the rand was still at 11.40. Today, it's close to 10.40. So a lot of the headwinds changed into tailwinds since then. So the risk for inflation going into this year and staying very high above 6% is actually reducing. So that allows them a little bit of a breathing space. Having said that, I still do think, given the stickiness of inflation, the level of the currency where we are right now, we're likely to see more rate hikes, but that would probably be closer to the end of this year instead of right now in the immediate future.
What about this U.S. Federal Reserve tapering program that's likely to put the rand under a little bit of pressure? Tell us about this and how it plays out for the South African economy.
I think if you talk about the rand, we think that the rand will probably remain under pressure. What we mean when we say that is that there's too many headwinds right now that make us believe that there's any scenario where the rand can appreciate significantly, meaning that the rand can go back to below 10 or even close to 9 at this point in time. So if we think about what's pushing the rand or keeping the rand at these levels, then it is basically the U.S. Federal Reserve tapering. Simply what that means is that the support that the U.S. Federal Reserve is providing for the U.S. economy is reducing every month by about $10 billion. So that's a normalization of global liquidity, which means that slowly the capital will flow back to the U.S. and to other parts in the developed markets, also the Europe as we speak. And as a result of that, that do put pressure on emerging market currencies. So that is a headwind for the South African currency as well going forward. And then on top of that, we've got a quite significant current account deficit, which means that we import much more than what we export. I've referred to the fact that exports are also under pressure due to the mining and other striking activity taking place. So given the fact that we've got this huge current account deficit, it's one of the biggest compared to other emerging markets, we need to fund that current account deficit. And one way of doing that, if foreigners are not willing to invest in the country or they are reducing the investment in the country, and you've got the the headwind of Federal Reserve pulling liquidity out of the system, that is a significant headwind, and the currency will need to stay under pressure or depreciate even further in that kind of scenario. So as a result of that, we do see the currency remain a little bit under pressure, and again, that's not very positive for inflation, and again, that makes it quite difficult for Reserve Bank in terms of their monetary policy action going forward for the rest of this year.
Thank you very much for joining us. That's investment specialist Martin Ackerman joining us live from Cape Town. Save, South Africans. Save, save, save. That's the mantra. That's what we have to do in this country. We have to learn to save a little bit better. Now, on a positive note, yesterday we brought you Football Fan Couture, a campaign run during the run-up to the Nedbank Cup final. Well, the final was this weekend past, and today we have Nedbank in studio to talk about what we can look forward to for the rest of the year, as well as fashion designer Craig Jacobs. Our producer, Katrine Milan, is standing by after her weekend away with these gentlemen.
You're never going to let me forget that, hey, Eben? The Nedbank Cup action ended on a high note this past weekend, with the Orlando Pirates ensuring they ended the season with at least one trophy, beating Bidvest Wits 3-1 at the Moses Mabhida Stadium in Durban. However, all is not over yet. We now make way for the Kiona team search, the so-called idols of soccer, with the last tryouts actually happening this weekend in Joburg. During the course of this year's Cup, we also saw the return of Goals for Goals campaign, as well as a bit of a fashion flair with the introduction of Football Fan Couture. In studio with us, we have Nkosinathi Msiza, the Senior Communication Manager of Nedbank, as well as designer for Fundutsi, Craig Jacobs, one of the designers part of Football Fan Couture. Guys, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you and good morning, Katrina.
I'm glad to see you guys survive the weekend.
Indeed, it's good to be back in Johannesburg as well.
And Nkosinathi, it was the first ever Nedbank Cup weekend. Was it everything you guys expected? What was the whole idea behind it?
The idea behind my Nedbank Cup weekend is really to connect two worlds that sometimes as South Africans we choose to separate. We look at the football fan in a separate context, and we look at the lifestyle and the couture and the fashion in a different box altogether. Nedbank is inspired by people who save, as Eben was saying, who save for their children's education, who save for the ticket to buy a ticket for the match for the Nedbank Cup. And then we said, how can we add a lifestyle component that would see two worlds of top designers such as Craig, combining with super fans such as Eugene Khoza from Orlando Pirates, and see when these two worlds collide, what can South Africans really produce to really make us believe that when you dream, anything is possible.
Now, Craig, you were with Eugene, and you guys didn't win the football fan couture competition that went to David Tlale and Alfred Baloy, but your team did win. Tell us, how was it, this whole campaign, working with Eugene the last 3 months and then at this weekend?
I think, it was amazing working with Eugene. He's such a dedicated person to his team. He's a great mascot for Orlando Pirates. And I learned a little bit from him about how he creates things, how he uses found objects and incorporates it into his garments. And that's what I tried to do in terms of what I created with the collection. It's like the little pieces of makarapa, as kind of pieces of treasure on the garments as well. I thought he was great, and he was over the moon. I mean, Kosanati was talking about making dreams happen, and Eugene had never gone on a flight before. He'd never gone on a plane. And thanks to Nedbank and thanks to my Nedbank weekend, he got to actually experience that.
And I remember they didn't take off the outfits the entire weekend. I wonder if it's off now. Of course, Nadia, a lot of campaigns running this year. The Goals for Goals campaign. Can you just tell us a bit more about that?
So the Nedbank Cup has a sports development component, and that is called Goals for Goals initiative in partnership with the Sports Trust. Now, for every goal that is scored during the Nedbank Cup season itself, 10,000 Rand goes towards a 1 million Rand target that we had set at the beginning, so that we can build a 1 million Rand multi-purpose sports facility for a school in the country. We are pleased to announce that a school in Diepsloot has been identified, and 1 million Rand with the 3 goals and the one from VET have been scored, so we can start building that school.
That's great. It's the second year this campaign is running, right?
It's been running for over 3 years. The money has been increasing. 10,000 has been the highest. It previously used to be about 8,000. And for the first year, we've actually achieved 100 goals exactly with the campaign. So Diepsloot will be bringing you sports to your community.
Now the next step, it's now the Kiona team's search, with the final rounds taking place this weekend. Can you just tell us a bit more about that?
Certainly. Young men between the ages of 18 and 35 across South Africa have been saying anyone can be extraordinary. We've gone to 4 different other provinces this weekend, as we've rightfully said. We're looking forward to seeing over 1,300 young men coming to the stadium, trying to be the next team that will play against Orlando Pirates. So the Nedbank Cup champions will be playing against the Kiona team surge towards September, to show that anyone can be extraordinary if they partner with Nedbank.
Now, Craig, this Football Fan Couture campaign was also now a new initiative, and it brought the top 3 designers together with the top 3 superfans. What do you think about this returning perhaps next year, and maybe getting more up-and-coming designers involved?
Look, I think it's a great idea, because, I didn't realize how big this would be when I agreed to be involved. And it's been amazing that the feedback from a whole range of different people are aware of it, and also were saying, why didn't something like this happen before? So I think that it's got a lot of legs to it, and I think that it would be great to incorporate young people, emerging designers, to also get them part of the process, in the same way that with the Kiona initiative is about getting young players coming up. And it would be great to because it's all about skill sharing, it's all about passing on knowledge and making the circle bigger. So I think it's a great idea.
Of course, Nati, last and just final word, just quickly tell us what's ahead for the rest of the year for Nedbank.
People can look forward to many things from Nedbank as we continue to innovate and prove that we're a bank for all. Some of the things on the football side, the Kiona Team Search trials are going ahead this weekend. A TV series will be launched on SABC, one particularly, where we'll show the journey of these players, and ultimately these players will play against Orlando Pirates, as I've said, in September, and hopefully more players will be signed into the PSL.
Now, there you have it, guys. Thank you so much for joining us in studio. That was Nkosi Nati Msiza from Nedbank, as well as Craig Jacobs for Fundutsi joining us to talk about, we're just wrapping up the last bit of the Nedbank Cup. Eben, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Katrina. I like what Mark says. Make the circle bigger. It's a little bit close to home there. Of course, I can tell you now that the court's not in session yet. It seems as if matters are still being discussed as to how this ruling will go down this morning. They're still in chambers. But in the meantime, let's have a look at what you are talking about on social media at SABC Newsroom, of course, on Twitter. That's where we live. Am says, thinking of and praying for you, Oscar Pistorius. Believing in you always. You continue to inspire me. Yes, we all. Pretoria Raincloud says, let's see if Oscar Pistorius is given special treatment to manipulate his assessment as an outpatient. More lies coming, says Pretoria Raincloud. On my own mind, says Oscar Pistorius should not be referred to Weskoppies as an outpatient. He should be locked up in there so he can finally confuse. I don't understand. I'm confused. Anyhow, Ian Levy says, it's a pity that Oscar's defense did not get the truth out of Oscar Pistorius, or maybe they did. It would appear they got a fabrication. Andrew Pike. So will Oscar Pistorius check into Weskoppies each day and then go home to be briefed by Barry Roo on what to say to the doctors the next day. Interesting observation there from Andrew Pike. Of course, we're waiting for the court to get underway. They're a little bit behind, but we have been told that, well, the judge are still in chambers having some sort of discussion with Barry Roo and Gerinel. Let's take a short break. When we come back, hopefully we'll go into the court. If not, well, we'll set it up even further. This is Newsroom on SABC News.
You ask? This is who we are.
We are technologically driven.
We are unashamedly Afrocentric.
We advise you not only on legal matters,
but on health issues as well.
We bring imagination to life.
We celebrate arts and culture and lifestyle.
We tackle life challenges head on.
We dig deep. We probe. We question.
We invite you to take a view from our house, as we tell it without fear, separating fiction from factual. We are the SABC News Channel.
All news, all global, all the time.
SABC News. We report, contextualize and present news and current affairs honestly, fairly and fully. We consider it a duty to provide consistent, relevant, useful and top-quality information and analysis. Our mission is to provide credible, accurate and interesting news programming, bringing news into everyone's homes in everyone's languages. Thank you, South Africa, for relying on SABC News for quality news output and for making us your #1 source of information. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. Let's just take a look at our top stories on SABC News right now. The ANC's National Executive Committee is expected to announce premier candidates for the 8 provinces it controls during a news conference in Johannesburg a bit later today. The party completed a grueling debate over the lists submitted by provincial structures last night. Provincial legislatures will endorse the premiers tomorrow, and President Jacob Zuma will announce his cabinet on Sunday, a day after his inauguration on Saturday. The details of the Oscar Pistorius mental observation judgment will be outlined at the High Court in Pretoria today. Judge Thokozile Masipa is expected to hand down a specific order, including details of whether or not the athlete will be an outpatient, where he will be admitted, and the number of psychologists and psychiatrists that will be treating him. Platinum producers Lonman, Impala and Anglo American are expected to oppose an urgent court interdict by trade union AMCU at the Johannesburg Labour Court today. AMCU wants the mines to stop communicating a new wage offer directly to about 70,000 workers who have been on strike for nearly 4 months now. Of course, we're still waiting for the court to get into its work this morning. 10 minutes behind schedule now. We've been told that Judge Masipa is seeing counsel in chambers. But let's look back to last week. We spoke to legal expert Bernard Hotz from Worksman's Attorneys on this matter. Let's have a look at what he had to say about today.
Has been adduced. I think Gerinel has quite successfully challenged their so-called expertise and cast doubt on the testimony that has been given in a number of instances. But what we're now faced with is a curveball, where I think what the defence put in an expert witness to obviously deal with Oscar's state of mind, an anxiety problem. And the whole reason for that is because obviously an argument is going to be put forward that perhaps one has to look at mitigating factors when it comes to intent. The prosecution, as we saw, immediately started asking a question of the expert, namely, could Oscar Pistorius appreciate right from wrong? Answer was yes. And that led us into another dimension, which I don't think necessarily the defense anticipated happening.
Now, yesterday's application, was it strange or out of the ordinary that an application like this was granted?
I don't think so at all, because one must bear in mind that you now have an expert testifying to a mental state of mind. The judge, neither the judge nor the assessors are experts in that arena. So what the Criminal Procedure Act says is that where somebody's mental capacity is put into question, the court has a duty to say, hold on a moment, this may have an effect on the outcome of this trial. We need to assess, does this person actually have a mental issue, diminished capacity? And the only way that the court can determine this is by invoking the provision that the judge has invoked in terms of the Criminal Procedure Act to say we need to send the accused, Oscar Pistorius, for an inquiry. Only once that inquiry has been conducted in the manner set out in the Criminal Procedure Act by a whole host of experts over a period of time can the court then comprehend and try and reach a decision. Is there a problem or is there not a problem?
Now, should this application and this whole discussion not have happened a bit earlier in the trial? It's happening only now. What?
That's why I say this is a legal soap opera, because you never know what's going to happen on each day. It conceivably, bear in mind that the defence is not one of mental incapacity. The defence that was raised is, I thought it was an intruder and I was acting in self-defense. So the last time we spoke, we were talking about putative self-defense and what came out in Oscar's testimony, which really doused to a large degree that defense of putative self-defense. So all of a sudden we're now dealing with this, and correctly so. Gerrie Nel says, but hold on a moment, I see you raising something over here. In good sense, one has to say, but is this an issue? If it is an issue, bearing in mind that Professor Forster or Dr. Forster only allegedly observed Oscar Pistorius on 2 occasions. In order to do proper justice to that, there has to be a proper inquiry over an extended period so that the experts can come to court and say we're in agreement or we're not in agreement. But there's also another twist, because if after the period of observation, the experts who have assessed Oscar are not in agreement. So if there's a unanimous result, that's one thing. The court can say, well, we've got a unanimous result from the experts, I can now accept that. Somebody can challenge that, the prosecutor can challenge it, even if it's unanimous. But you may also find that the experts are not unanimous, in which event the judge says, I need to hear those experts in court. They need to be examined and cross-examined. So we're now on another path completely.
Now,
well, that was Bernard Hotz from Worksmen's Attorneys talking to Katrine Milan last week about how they thought today will play out. Of course, they are still in chambers at the moment. Judge Thokozile Masipa, Barry Roo and Gerrie Nel are discussing the merits of how things will play out today. While we're waiting, let's take a look at our top stories on SABC News platforms right now. The ANC will this morning in Johannesburg reveal the names of preferred candidates as premiers who will lead the 8 provinces that the party is in control of. This follows the ruling party's special National Executive Committee grueling meeting, which ended in Pretoria last night. Each province was expected to give 3 names to the NEC for consideration.
Top on the list of the NEC, the appointment of premiers for 8 provinces. The party top brass met to finalize the premiers who are expected to be endorsed by provincial legislatures tomorrow.
We've adopted 2 other principles almost as a reminder that wherever there is a male premier, there will be a female speaker. Number 2, We will not allow any provincial executive to have less than 50% of women.
Most provinces submitted lists of male-dominated candidates. Mantashe says the leadership of the party tried its best to convince those who may not be in favor of some of the premiers. Amongst those expected to be appointed is the incumbent in Gauteng, Nomvula Mokonyane, though she did not feature in a list submitted by her party. President Jacob Zuma is expected to announce his cabinet on Sunday, a day after his inauguration for his second term on Saturday.
Democratic Alliance leader Helen Zille says she could take over the party reins in Parliament next year. This follows the sudden and unexpected departure of Lindiwe Mazibuko. Nominations for the positions opened yesterday.
The nomination list is wide open after DA Federal Chair James Self declined the position of acting parliamentary leader. Zille vehemently denies she'll endorse any candidate for the position after Musi Maimane was touted for it. But she says she'll be keeping a close eye on whomever is elected.
And after a year, I will assess the situation, and if needs be, I will go back to Parliament.
The DA's 89-member caucus will vote on its leader next Thursday. Meanwhile, the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces are ready to welcome the 400 new members who will make up the 5th Parliament. New MPs will be sworn in by the Chief Justice on Wednesday morning. The 54 permanent delegates of the NCOP will be sworn in on Thursday. The Secretary of the National Assembly was firm. No party colours or insignia will be allowed in the House. He says the Speaker could ask any offenders to excuse themselves. Lukaino Kalata, SABC News, Parliament.
Judge Thokozile Masipa is still in chambers and we're waiting for court proceedings to get underway at the North Gauteng High Court any minute now. But let's take another look at what you are talking about on social media. Last night, the PSL Awards dominated social media. Today, it seems it's Oscar Pistorius. Andrew Harding says Oscar Pistorius sits in court awaiting decision on details of his 30-day psychiatric evaluation. That is live tweeting from the court. That is, and then Busi Khadebe says Overflow courtroom closed. Everyone is in the main court right now. They're still waiting for Judge Thokozile Masipa to come out. And then our very own Griselda Lewis. Then there was a young artist singing a song called Who's Oscar Pistorius outside the court. That was a little bit of light entertainment outside the court there this morning. Jean Esterhazen says Reva's mother, June Steenkamp, isn't at today's court proceedings. I'm sure she's back in Port Elizabeth. Lebogang Ramaboea says Judge Thokozile Masipa, if she grants that Oscar Pistorius must be an outpatient, she must guard against showing favoritism. That is the big concern today. Let's have a look at our Facebook page now. Of course, platinum employers oppose an urgent application by AMCU today to stop them directly texting striking miners about wage increases. Then the trial of Czech fugitive Radovan Krecha will continue, and the details of Oscar Pistorius' mental observation judgment will be outlined at the High Court in Pretoria. All of that and more on our Facebook page. You saw it right there. Then today in history, celebrated American aviator Amelia Earhart became the first woman to fly alone across the Atlantic Ocean on May 20th and 21st in 1932. The trip set a new record of 14 hours, 56 minutes. The following footage we found is of Amelia speaking after completing a flight from Honolulu, Hawaii to Oakland, California on January the 12th in 1935, meaning that she completed flights over both the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans.
How does it feel to fly both oceans, Miss Earhart?
Well, it was very interesting to me to fly in southern waters rather than in the north. On the Atlantic flight, I had ice conditions and general storm. On this flight, really no bad weather at all except a few little rain squalls. I saw the moon and stars most of the night. Of course, in both flights, I was very glad to see land.
Still celebrated as one of the greatest female aviators of all time. That was Amelia Earhart, and that was this day in history. We're still waiting for the court to get underway, but Newsroom has come to an end. Elvis, I see he's coming in. He'll be your host for the rest of the morning. You've been watching Newsroom on SABC News. We love it in the morning.
The JSE, which didn't trade yesterday, opened quite strongly